just coincidentally, this is National Police Week. And today our speaker, Ralph Holiman, is certainly part of that group that has done such a good job over the years, making us all safe and comfortable where we live. Ralph, as you may have heard from his last speaking engagement here, Ralph was formerly with the DEA, FBI, and perhaps one or two other different police organizations in his career.
I said, these are just like the wires they used to hook us up with, and we'd be going undercover, and we'd be like, are you sure they can't see this? And the tech guy like, you look fine, he won't see a thing. Well, anyway, thank y'all for having me back a second time. And as some of y'all may remember, like I said, I was an FBI agent for a while. Then I was a DEA agent for much longer, and then I was an investigator for the state of Mississippi after that. And I was some other stuff, but it's always a little confusing. So people are like, now wait a minute, was he in the FBI or was he in the DEA? Because so-and-so said he was in the FBI, but I heard he was so I was in both. And there are not a whole lot of us walking around that were stupid enough to do both, but I was one of them. So anyway, last time, to just catch it up, I started out with my experiences working in Texas and working in New Orleans, mainly working cartel cases. Worked a lot against the Medellin cartel, the Gulf cartel down in Mexico and stuff. Well, this picks up at the end in 1994 when my life took a little bit of an unexpected turn, and I got transferred to Baltimore, Maryland. And that was 1994, and went from sunny, hot, muggy, down here. I got up there in November, and it was like 10 degrees. There were 1.5 feet of snow on the ground. I was in a t-shirt. I went straight to some store and bought this giant green parka that I wore everywhere I went, I felt like, for the next 7 years. But anyway, this is what I look like the day I showed up at the Baltimore office, and they took my face for my ID photo and everything. And I titled this show, someone was asking what it was about, and I said that time they did a TV show about us. And I'll get to that in a minute, but I'll go ahead and I'll tell you that comes up in a little later. That comes up after my first year in Baltimore. So I'll tell you a little bit about my first year in Baltimore, because I think that was kind of interesting too. They originally put me in the airport group. And what we did in the airport group was we would try to pick up drug smugglers that were traveling through the airport, smuggling drugs and stuff. And it was actually a pretty easy job. Most of these people, it's not hard to pick them out. And I would always say it's like, because they're nervous as they can be, they're flying by themselves, and they just, they're not like a normal traveler, generally. They just, because one, I always give this idea, they don't ever have a good story when you stop them and talk to them. And people are like, well, I don't understand why people don't tell these drug couriers, you need to have a good story and be able to explain this stuff. And the reason is they could never sell them on this. If you went up to somebody and said, hey, I need you to haul some drugs for me, and I'm going to pay you $5,000, but the police may come up and talk to you, and if you don't say the right things, you're going to go to prison for 20 or 30 years. Nobody would take that deal. So the way they sell this thing is they're like, nobody's going to talk to you. You're not going to see anybody. This is going to be the easiest money you ever made in your life. You just get on the airplane, fly there, drop the drugs off, go have a nice meal, and fly home. So they're usually caught kind of unawares when they actually do run into us. And I always tell people, it's like, I explain it to guys like this. They're like, well, I don't understand. I think I'd keep my cool. I'm like, no, you wouldn't. I said, let me explain it to you a different way, the way I used to explain it to guys I would train there. Say you're married and you're having an affair, and your girlfriend comes up and gives you nude pictures of her when you're about to go home from work because you've met her at lunch. And she says, just put them in your briefcase. Does your wife ever look in your briefcase? And he's like, no. He goes, you'll be fine. Just put them in the briefcase. She won't find them. And you walk in the front door, and your wife's standing there, and she's like, hey, how's it going? And you go, good, good. And she goes, I see you got your briefcase with you. Well, at that point, things that you have no control over are going to start taking effect because your instinct in the back of your head thinks a saber-toothed tiger is about to kill you. And 100,000 years of training, your body's going to get started ready to run, which means your blood flow is going to change, adrenaline's going to get dumping into your body, and it's like going, we need to run, we're going to die. But you're thinking, I can still handle this. And then she goes, you mind if I look in there? Now you're like going, and it's like this. And the thing is, same way with drug dealers. We would come up to them and you'd walk up to them, and we'd usually have a lot of times we'd have a tip too. They'd flown somewhere, or they had a record. They were flying back and forth, staying 2 hours and going home. It's the same thing. You'd walk up to them and you go, hey, DEA, how you doing? And they'd kind of get that first, I see you got a briefcase look. And then you'd go, and we'd always ask them the same questions that they'd already been asked by the ticket agents. We're like, did you pack that suitcase yourself? Well, now they know what's in it. If it's not drugs, if we're wrong, they'd be like, oh yeah, of course I packed it myself. Who else would have packed it? But the other person the person who's been handed a suitcase full of drugs, he doesn't know what to say, or she doesn't. So they'll do this. They'll look at us and they'll look at that suitcase and they'll look back at you. And I go, it's a pretty easy question. And then it didn't matter what they said. If they said no, I go, no, you let somebody else pack it? Who? And a lot of times they'd give it up, $5,000. They said it'd be easy. But if they said, yes, I did pack it, I go, okay, well then you know what's in it. Are there any drugs in there? Well, now it's that same thing. They're looking at the suitcase. You go, it's an easy question. I could say no if you asked me about my suitcase. And so it really wasn't that hard to do. And like this case, this is the biggest one I ever made out there. It was 8 keys of coke. And it was just like that. It was easy. We had a ticket agent. And these ticket agents a lot of them were our informants. And we would pay them rewards for giving us this information. And this ticket agent comes to me and says, I think I got a good one coming in from LA. And I go, why? He said, because these two tickets were bought 5 minutes apart by a travel agency in Los Angeles. I said, but then they came up and they gave their luggage to the sky cap at almost exactly the same time to be checked. He goes, and he goes, but they're sitting apart from each other in the airplane. And he goes, there's plenty of empty seats. They could be sitting next to each other if they wanted to be. So I'm like, all right, yeah, that sounds good. So we bring them in, same thing, we even get a dog hit on the bag, so we're like, yeah, this is easy. We're just kind of fooling with them now. But finally get her, and we can see the other guy, because it was only 3 of us that day. 2 of us are on her, 1 of them's on him, and he's inching toward the cabs. And he knows this is not going right. But we're trying to get consent from her, because we can't just open people's bags. They either have to give us consent or we have to go get a warrant. And every once in a while they make us go get a warrant. So I can just see him getting closer and closer to the cab, and the agent out there with him going, do I grab him? Do I not grab him? Do I grab him? He's giving me the signal. So he gets into the cab, I open it up, it's full of coke, and I'm like, grab him, and he's like pointing at the cab. So we ended up chasing him all the way to DC before we caught that cab, because our cars weren't parked close. And but we knew where he was going, and it was a miracle. It'd be a long story, but we finally caught him. I was actually surprised when we caught him. So anyway, that was a great time. And like I said, it was great. You just walked around. There was nice air conditioning all the time. Coffee anywhere I wanted to drink. I used to think, this is the best job I ever had in DEA. It just can't be messed up. And like one morning, I even made a case while I was waiting for my coffee. The Starbucks was right across from one of the terminals where all the Los Angeles flights come in. And I got there at 4:30, and I'm like first in line for Starbucks, and the line's starting to go up behind me. And all of a sudden, the red eye from LA comes in. I was like, man, I don't want to lose my place in line, but I can see pretty good here. So I'm watching, and this guy comes out, and I can just see the perfect outline of a kilo right here. You can tell he's got stuck in his pants. And so I'm like thinking, they're fixing to open this thing, and I'm fixing to get my coffee. And so I'm trying to get on the radio to call the other guys just to intercept him. and nobody will answer the radio. So I'm like, so I just start following him. And I'm still calling everybody on the radio, and nobody's answering. So finally he gets to the cabs, and I got to jack him up. And I just turn around. I go, is it heroin or coke? He goes, cocaine. All right, okay. So I said, don't try to run, because I didn't even have my handcuffs on me. I hadn't even gone to the office yet. They were in the office. So I'm walking him back, and I come in, and everybody's like, what have you been doing? I go, well, I was getting coffee, but I got this guy instead. So anyway, it was an easy job. So anyway, this day comes, and one of the other agents there, a guy named Bill Hocker, I got a picture here somewhere. But anyway, he comes to me and goes, hey, man. He goes, Victor, who is our supervisor, he wants me to go to Group 2, the heroin group in Baltimore. He goes, what do you think? I said, no, why would you go there? That's the most dangerous group in DEA. You're working in the ghetto. Everybody they work has killed somebody. I'm like, no, that's crazy. Tell him no. He goes, you're right. I don't know what I was even thinking. So he leaves. About 15 minutes later, Victor calls me in his office. He goes, Group 52 needs somebody. I asked Cocker. He said no, so you're going. So that was how I ended up in leaving the best job ever in my life, going to the worst job I ever had in my life. So anyway, this was another day I was out there, and they'd caught 1,200 kilos of cocaine. I had absolutely nothing to do with that case, but I got my picture on TV. So I did a picture, that's me, next to a customs agent who was a friend of mine who had absolutely nothing to do with the case either. So we always laughed about that the case agents, because they were out, working leads and stuff on their cases, so they just propped us up there like we were case agents. So anyway, I go to Baltimore, and this was the group when I first got there. So it was a normal-looking bunch of guys. It was half DEA agents and half Baltimore city cops, and we basically kind of grouped up into like three groups of 3 or 4 people, because, and sometimes you'd be more, because when we were out working stuff, you really needed that many people to go out and do stuff. And if we were ever going to go out and we were doing search warrants and stuff, we'd take everybody. Well, the problem when I got there, I found is all I'd ever work was cartels and stuff. And that's what I liked working. I liked working on these big guys, thousands of pounds of drugs and stuff. Well, you get there, and I get to Group 52, I'm like, oh, what's the biggest case y'all made here? I'm like, oh, we got a guy with 50 grams of heroin last year. And I was like, what? And I was like, what about the guys who are bringing in? They go, they don't want us working those guys. They want us working the guys who are killing everybody. And so that's what we did. And I'll show you that this is an interesting picture. And I'll see if I can. You can see 1993, Baltimore had 353 murders. Now this is in a town that's only got 450,000 people. So I think to put it this way, if the murder rate in Hancock County was the same as Baltimore, I think we'd have like 40 people killed a year or something. It would be crazy. And 94 was the year I got there, and they were still running good. They were down to only 321. Then they went back up to 325, and then 328, 312. You can see I left in September of 2009, so you can see that my presence there brought the murder rate down from the 300s to the high 200s. That was my accomplishment there. But the basic problem was, like I said, there's a lot of people getting murdered in Baltimore. And so one of the ways they were trying, and you couldn't ever convict them of murder because you'd pull their rap sheets and they'd be like, whoever, arrested for murder. And then like a month later you would see arrested for witness intimidation. Then another 2 weeks, arrested for witness intimidation again. And then a month after that, charges dismissed. And you would just see that over and over and over again. So they kind of got this idea, which is what the TV show was based on. And I'll get to that later. That really, if a guy's out killing people, it doesn't really matter what you lock him up for as long as you get him locked up. So we were always targeting the guys that were killing people, trying to make heroin cases on, which wasn't the easiest thing to do anyway, because like I said, they killed all the witnesses. And so we go out working. Let me tell you a little bit about Baltimore and the drug trade first. Baltimore is a weird place because, like I said, the city in 1950 had 2 million people in it. By the time I got there, it was down to 450,000, but you still had all the buildings like it still had that many people in it. And this is what it looked like. I mean, everywhere you went, this is what it looked like. And I mean, there would be blocks and blocks and blocks that looked like this. And if you'll notice, there's not a lot of cars. So, surveillance was really hard. I mean, it was really hard not, to have them not see you. And so, and there's another good example. I mean, and these, you would have entire city blocks that were boarded up. Just nothing there. Yeah, they actually, back in the day, these had to have been really nice places. But to do a search warrant on one of these places was like the worst nightmare you could ever have, because this is typical. 3 stories high, they all have basements, and they would be like, they're narrow. You can see how narrow these things are here. So it's like each floor has 2 rooms on it. Like the bottom floor would have a den and a kitchen. Then you'd go up, and there'd be like a bedroom and a bathroom. Then you'd go up, and there might be 2 bedrooms and a bathroom. And you would go, and the funny thing was, I guess I'd been on a few. See, I was in New Orleans, and we would go knock doors down, once a week or something like that. In Baltimore, we were just doing it every day. I mean, just one after the other. One day, my record was we hit 8 places in one day. And every one of these, you would hit this place, and you'd be going up these stairs, and all you could be thinking about was some guy just leaning over and raining bullets down on you. So we had these big shields, that were supposed to be in front of you, but we'd hold them over as like umbrellas when we were going up the stairs. And even the basements were even worse, because you'd get down there and there'd be no lights, and they're old. A lot of these buildings are 150 years old, and so we got boxes of these chem lights, and you'd be breaking chem lights and just throwing them down there so it lighted up enough where you could go down there. And a lot of times, the buildings were abandoned and these people were living in them, and you go down and there'd be buckets of, where they'd been going to the bathroom, and you'd step in them. Anyway, it was a real glamorous job. And so we were doing that just all the time. And you would, one of the targets I worked, and it was like so frustrating, because let's see if I hope I got some pictures of it. I don't think I do. I don't think those made it. What you would have in these cities would be a drug corners, and the whole deal was you would be trying to work these up to the guy that ran it, and you would see like 6 or 7 guys on the corner, and so we'd be doing surveillance from really far away, because if you were anywhere close, we used to find the best thing to do was, and there were so many drug operations in Baltimore, that we would get a drug operation we weren't watching in between the one that we were watching and us. That way, they'd be like going, are these cops ever going to leave? And the guys down there would be like, oh, they're just watching those guys, But you'd be looking past them, because they weren't going to do anything, go up close ones. And you tried to identify all the members of the thing, because you'd always have a guy who was in charge, and he wasn't going to touch any dope. He wasn't going to touch any money. Then you would have the guy that was actually handing the dope out, and he wouldn't. And they would have these guys that we called them runners, that would go and pick up more dope when they needed it, and they wouldn't keep much. They'd keep, maybe 50 dosage units or something, and this is what they sold right here. Those are heroin caps right there. They're capsules, but they always called them caps. And so they even had little catchy names for them. It was like a pack was like 50, and a click was like 10 or something, or a clip was 10, and a pack was 50. And so they'd just be going and getting them as you needed. So we'd be trying to figure out where these guys were going. And then once you found out where they were going, we'd move on and try to find the guy that was supplying it. And then we'd, trying to work our way back to the stash house and the boss. And sometimes you were more successful than others. And we would have, helicopters and stuff up, sometimes airplanes helping us, but it was so bad in Baltimore that they actually tried to shoot our helicopter down one day. And the funny thing was the pilots didn't even know it because we had this camera on it. It was called a RAID camera, R-A-I-D. I don't remember what that stood for. And it would shoot back to the office. And so you would just we'd have one guy in the office sitting here watching this video screen and, and radioing to us what was going on. And so the guy's looking and he notices that guys on the ground are shooting at the helicopter with AK-47s. So he radios the pilot and goes, hey, y'all see y'all are getting shot at, right? And they're like, where? And he goes, they're right under you. They're shooting at you. And they're like, we don't hear anything. And they go, well, he's shooting at you. I don't know. So they get back, and there was 2 bullet holes in the thing. I mean, they had actually hit him. So the helicopter pilots, they were real enthusiastic about going out after that. So anyway, they would sell these things. And this is heroin. And to give you another idea of just how bad the heroin problem was in Baltimore, DEA had this program, a research program where all over the country they would have you go out and buy a certain amount of heroin once a quarter, every 3 months. And it would be the same thing. They would say, go out and make 8 heroin buys for $50. We want to see what $50 of heroin looks like, in every city, and then we're going to test it and see what the purity is and everything. So we would have to go make those buys in New Orleans, and it would be the worst duty you ever got. Because in New Orleans at the time, selling heroin was life in prison. So nobody wanted to sell it to somebody they didn't know. And it would sometimes take us a couple of weeks to make those 8 buys. And we'd be getting bunked. We'd be buying aspirin and stuff, and we didn't even care. We just wanted to turn it in. And it would be really weak heroin. I mean, it'd be like 1.6% pure heroin. When I get to Baltimore, of course, being the heroin group, they would tell us to go make these 8 heroin buys. The longest it ever took us to do it was 45 minutes. And that's only because they said, don't buy it all in one place. So probably 40 of those minutes we were driving to a different place. And it was also it was really strong heroin. It was like 12% pure heroin that they were shooting up. And the way heroin works in these big cities is you've got 2 kinds of heroin they sell. They'll sell you raw heroin, and they use it for sniffing, snorting it, and they can smoke it to a certain extent, even though it doesn't smoke that well. Or they shoot it up. Well, if you shoot raw heroin up, it doesn't matter what kind of tolerance you have built up for it, you're going to die. So they shoot up what they call scramble. And scramble is the heroin that's got stuff mixed with it. Usually it's got quinine or mannitol or stuff like that. And there's reasons for that. The mannitol, one of the consequences of being a heroin addict is you get constipated. It messes with your gut and your intestinal system, so they all stay constipated all the time. Well, mannitol is a form of laxative, so it helps them with that. The quinine was even a little more diabolical because heroin addicts have a way of judging how good a heroin dosage is by, they call it the burn when they first shoot it in. Well, the quinine gives them a burn that's not real, but makes them think they got better heroin than they got. And the funny and the weird thing is the way they'll test this stuff. They'll go to what they do is you'd have the main guy. He would drive to New York and he would pick up a kilo of heroin. Well, he would take a junkie with him and have them shoot it up to test it to make sure they weren't giving him a bad batch of heroin. And the way I found out, I arrested a junkie when I was at the bus station did. Our guys who were over at the bus station when I was at the airport, we did them both, calls up and goes, hey, we got this girl with a bunch of heroin, 200 grams from, that's a lot of heroin there, 200 grams from New York. So I go over and we talk to her, and we're going to try to do a controlled delivery, which is what we would usually try to get these people to do. We're like, hey, you can go to prison for 20 years, or you can take this heroin to the person that sent you, and then we'll pounce on them and cut you a break. Well, the guy she was sending it to was a guy named Tony Bay, who's a notorious drug trafficker and had killed a lot of people up there. And he was one of the characters in the TV show that I'll tell you all about later was, oops. And it's just us going out on a raid one day, but let's see. Oh, that was.
All that packages at the bottom.
Oh, this is just drugs and stuff. That was drugs. That's just drugs. So anyway, we could start working Tony Bay, and Tony Bay is like, I mean, he's every time we get a informant start to get into him, they get shot to death. His number two, we made a case on him before we could arrest him. He got shot to death, and this is the ranch where Tony Bay used to operate, and they called it the ranch because that was their version of the OK Corral. They said there had been so many shootouts in this place. And we sent an undercover up in there one time, and we came so close to getting him killed. We never sent another one up in there. And it was, we'd sent him up in there. He was an informant, but he was with one of our black female agents. And he was going to make a buy from one of Tony Bay's high-up people. Well, what he didn't tell us was he owed him money. So she drives him up in there in the car, and we're all on the outskirts. We had all this on videotape. I wish I still had to show it. And they immediately grab him and start beating him and dragging him down into the basement, which is where they would always kill people. And so she's just cool as a cucumber. She's like on the radio, says, y'all better get in here. Y'all better get in here. They're effing him up. Y'all better get in here. And but we couldn't hear. It was like, like these, the radios never work. So finally, she drives her car up in and runs over two or three of them, opens the door, and it's like really spectacular. She's jumping curves and stuff, and she slams the door open. He's laying there. She goes, get in the car, get in the car. He gets in. She's backing up with the door open. They're bouncing around, and she comes flying down this street, and then you hear her look over him. She goes, now, what was that all about? I mean, Rhonda just didn't flinch. She was just cool as a cucumber. I mean, it was, but anyway, I'd like to say that we arrested Tony Bay, but we didn't. After all the stuff we had done, and we'd made cases on tons of his other guys, he's driving down the road one night, and we think he's about to, going to go kill somebody or collect money or something. And a Baltimore police officer pulls him over, realizes he's got, trouble, calls backup. They pull him and four of his gang out, and they all got all kind of guns and stuff in the car. So Tony Bay's rolled up for that. There's not, but anyway, we get to go looking for all this stuff because we're like, they're going to be, all the other people are looking for it too. All the other drug dealers are looking for everything. And we found Tony Bay's car. That was his new Jaguar. And we grabbed that, and we hit the place his girlfriend was at where he'd been staying and got all that stuff. And I say that's his new Jaguar because Tony's old Jaguar was this green four-door one. And the reason it was his old one was we were going to put a tracker on his car. And back then, to get a tracker on a car, they weren't like they are now. They were these big things. I mean, it looked a little smaller than a VCR set. And so we had to steal the car to put them on because otherwise, you could never do it in time. It could take like an hour to install them. So we'd get a corridor to go steal the car, and then we'd bring it back, and the tech guys would wire it up just like this, wires hanging. And then we'd go put it back, and they'd get in it the next morning. They wouldn't know where it was, but we could track everywhere they went. Well, the only problem was he's up in a place not quite that bad, but it's not great. And so we had a car ready as soon as we pulled. He came in there, like midnight or something. We wait till about 1 or 2 a.m. We're like, all right, I think it's good. We're going to steal the car. So I got a guy ready to pull into his parking place the second we pull his car out so we can put it back in the same spot. Well, before he can pull in, this lady pulls in. And so he gets out and he goes, hey, I was waiting on that spot. And she's like, too bad. And he can't say he's the police, because I mean, so we're like, he's like, I really need that parking space. And she's like, go, screw you, go away. I've been working all day. And she walks in. And so I'm like, what happened? He goes, somebody got his parking place. I was like, so I went back with the car to help him wire it in. I said, well, just hope, wait. And if she leaves, get the spot or get a better spot. Get one close by. So we bring the car back about 2 or 3 hours later. The only spot that has come open is like 10 cars away from where he parked it. So we're like, well, what can we do? So we park it there. And the next morning, he comes out about 8 o'clock in the morning, and he walks to where his car is supposed to be. And he stands there like, And he looks around and he sees it, and then he walks over to it, and he's kind of got that. He's looking, and he gets in the car, and I go, I think we're okay. He drives it straight to a used car dealer, drops it off, and one of his boys comes and picks him up. So we let it sit there for a week, and then when they, we're like, he ain't coming back for that car. So we ride over there one day, and we're like, we need to borrow this car for a couple hours. He goes, well, let me get the key. I'm like, we already got keys. So, but that was the second Jaguar. So, anyway, the other thing that, and so like I said, they had I'll see if I can pull up. I'll tell you a little bit about this TV station. They told me this later. First, you had this. This is how I know the pedigree that this show was about us. This was written by a guy named David Simon, who was a Baltimore Sun reporter in Baltimore. And he wrote, well, that's not the right one. Hold on. He wrote, let's see. Where's Homicide? Come up in a second. There it is. All right. There it is. Oh yeah, from the Creator of the Wire, Homicide. This is when they re-put the book back out. They put that he did the Wire too. But anyway, so he writes this book about, and he follows 3 homicide detectives in Baltimore for a year and writes about the cases they worked. Well, one of the Baltimore detectives was a guy named Tom Pellegrini. So they ended up making a TV show about this later too. It had Richard Belcher, and they would be filming it all over Baltimore, and I was there, and you'd see them. And one morning we were running around the harbor like 6 a.m., and we thought we'd come up on a real murder scene. Because we're like, oh, somebody got murdered at the harbor. And then we look, and wow, that's that homicide guys. So, and a funny side story. One of the guys that played the detective that was supposedly based on Tom Pellegrini was Richard Belzer. He's like an actor and a comedian. So we were doing surveillance on the Baltimore train station one day waiting for a courier to come in. And we had a surveillance van out there to videotape everything that happened. And one of the guys says, hey, look, it's Belzer in the car line. You're in the cab line. And look over, and sure enough, it's this actor who plays the character based on Tom Pellegrini is sitting in the line waiting for a cab. So this agent was already kind of crazy looking. He had long, greasy hair. He just looked like I always thought he looked like a psycho. And so he goes, I'm going to get my picture with him. He calls the surveillance fan. He goes, well, I'm next to him. Take the picture. So he goes up, and I wish I had a copy of this picture. And he's standing next to Belzer. He goes, hey, man, big fan of your work. Can I get a picture with you? And he's like, yeah, sure. And so he's got his arm around him, and he's looking directly at the surveillance camera. And Belzer's like this. Like, this guy is acting like there's somebody with a camera there. So anyway, it was funny. We all, I hate it. You throw away too much stuff. So anyway, then he writes The Corner with this guy named Ed Burns. Maybe it'll pop up in a second. But anyway, he writes another series, The Corner, which was kind of one of these little drug dealing corners told from the perspective of the drug dealers. Now, that's kind of a cool thing. Well, then he's filming The Wire. Well, there's The Corner. And they did a book, and then they did a little mini-series about it, too. And it was on one of the corners we used to drive by and work all the time. And I don't remember who was running it back then, because they called them shops. And you'd have to be like, well, who's running that shop? And they go, that's Tony Bay's shop. Or who's running that shop? And that's Lil Howard's shop. And sometimes they would kill each other over it too. I mean, that was like a lot of the fights were over that territory. And believe it or not, the other big fight was over heroin brand names. Oh, there's the Garden Club. You can tell Laura and I share the same pictures. Yeah, they can't fool us. Anyway, but they would, in one of the big brands, they used to have weird brand names. They'd be like Tech Nine, Bad Dreams, just whatever you could think of. And they would sell them like that because one of the people that would work at these drug corners, they called them touts. Touts. I don't even know if that's a real word or not, maybe from the Middle Ages, but they would be the ones that would bring customers in. They'd be like, we got Tech 9 here, we got Tech 9, or we got Bad Dreams, and they'd come in. Well, the problem would be, because like Tech 9 was one of Tony Bay's brands, the problem would be when someone who wasn't Tony Bay would be telling people he had Tech 9, Tony Bay's people would go over and shoot them all. That was how trademark infringements were handled in the hood. There were no patent lawyers or anything involved. And the other weird thing you would see was they would come out with a new brand, and to get people to do it, they called them testers. And the first time I saw it, I couldn't believe it. It's the guys in the back of a pickup truck, and they're riding along, and they are throwing heroin caps at people on the sidewalk with a new brand, which was, I don't know, like Cloud 9. Hey, Cloud 9, try it, Cloud 9, at the corner of Carrollton and North. Yeah, they were giving out samples, and the first time I saw it, and we jumped out and we were trying to grab these people but it was like money had come out of the back of an armored truck and just went everywhere. So one of the things we did was later when and the funny thing was they put this show, The Wire, and y'all got to watch it because it's us. Well, Tom Pellegrini, about my third year there, the Baltimore police chief decided that all his detectives were too comfortable where they were. So he moved all the guys out of our group and brought in all new guys. Well, one of the guys he brought in was Tom Pellegrini, this homicide guy. And if you watch The Wire, that's what it's about. A homicide guy gets sent to the heroin group. And we were the only heroin group and doing wiretaps. There were other heroin groups, but we were the only ones doing wiretaps. We were doing tons of wiretaps too. And will it come up? But one of the other things we did, I don't know how much more time I've got. What's my time looking like? Okay. I'll tell you one of the other programs we did while I was there. While I was there, I got cancer, and it's okay. I survived it. I'll take the anticipation out. I survived. So anyway, I had a lot of major surgeries, and I come back to the office probably too early, and the ASAC told me, he goes, you shouldn't be back. And I go, I'm just bored at home. He goes, all right, you can sit in the group, but I don't want you going out on the street at all. And I go, oh, won't do it. Wouldn't even think about it. So like a week later, they're doing an undercover buy, and they're short of guys. They've only got like 3 guys in the group, and Todd, one of the guys, like, he goes, man, I don't have enough people. He goes, can you go with me? I said, I ain't supposed to go out. He goes, just ride in the car with me where I can say I had, 4 people out here. So I said, sure, what could go wrong? So I get in Todd's car, and while we're following the undercover, a guy runs a stop sign and totals the car. And neither one of us were hurt physically. Verbally, I was abused like you wouldn't believe. When I got back to the office, I had to listen to ASAC for like 20 minutes going, what part of not leaving the office do you not understand? So he got this great idea. He said, and he actually told me, he says, they need somebody in Intel. He goes, I'll put you somewhere where you ain't going out on the street. He goes, you're going to Intel now. I go, all right. And I was really pretty sad because Intel's pretty boring, And so I get to Intel, and I've been there like a week or two, and the supervisor comes up and says, hey, the FBI's got this new heroin program they want to try, and they're looking for somebody to come over there and work with them on it. Says, you used to be one of them. Why don't you go? I go, okay. So I go over there, and I don't think she even knew what they were going to be doing, because I don't think she'd have sent me if she knew. So what we were doing was, they got this great idea. All this stuff you got to have, this mannitol, this quinine, these little gel caps, they got to buy them somewhere. Now you can get them on Amazon, but back then there was no place to buy them. So only certain shops would sell these things. And so the FBI had a surveillance team, and they would be out there watching these shops. And when a guy comes in and he walks out with 5 or 6 gallons of mannitol and quinine and bags of gel caps, they'd follow him back to where they knew he had to be cutting up the heroin. Well, their problem was they were documented, but he said, we don't really have anybody that can go hit these places. And that's what they wanted me for. So I would go out there with them, And then I would call up my group and say, hey, I got a good one for you. And they would go hit the place. And I would go on the raids with them. And, you know, I'd say, don't say I was here. Don't put me on the report. If camera writer reads that, I'm done. And so that was a pretty fun program. And that was the place where, talking about how bad Baltimore is, I actually watched 2 people get shot to death when we were doing those surveillances. And to tell you how hard it is to catch people, we didn't catch the guy who did it either time. Because one time we're sitting there, and it's like all of a sudden just everybody runs. And they're probably only a half a block away, but just everybody takes off in a different direction. And there's this guy just laid out spread eagle, and I think that guy might be hurt. We drive over there, and he's dead. He'd been shot. And we had no idea who did it, you know, of the 25 that ran. So the other time we were sitting on one of these shops. And me and Eddie had the eye, and we see 7 guys go into the alley, and they walk in. It's right beside the shop, and about 5 minutes later, they come running out. I wonder what that was about. And Eddie goes, didn't 7 guys go into that alley? I go, yeah. He goes, I didn't count but 6 coming out. So we went and looked, and sure enough. And we didn't catch them either. But you got a lot of, I mean, it was a lot of fun. And the FBI had an undercover in who was actually selling them the stuff toward the end. We managed to get an undercover in, and that made it a lot easier because he'd call us up. And he was delivering it. The FBI started actually supplying all this quinine and mannitol, and they really didn't want it getting out on the street. You know, they were like, you know, we put this stuff out, y'all need to make sure you get it. But we had a lot of good cases. It was, but to show you how. And this is how people OD. When you would go into these places, we'd hit these places, and there'd be all the mannitol, the heroin, all these caps, and they got these brain dead looking people who, of course, are high as kites on heroin, and they got like their little metering thing, and they're metering it and putting it together and throwing it in a bag. And you're like, all it takes is for one of them to go, did I pull that or not? Yeah, and pull it again, and somebody just got a double dose. When fentanyl came out, fentanyl was coming out right as I left. It was almost unheard of. And junkies were just dropping dead up there. And you would think that they would be scared of that, but that became the heroin everybody wanted. Because if you got, you know, they were like, oh yeah, you get that fentanyl that kills a normal person, I can chop that up and make 3 doses out of it instead of 1. And that was one of the funny things. I had a trainee up there, and we were talking about how none of us really liked working these cases. We all like working cartel cases better. And so I had this trainee with me, and his picture was somewhere back there. Joe Rosati. I said, well, Joe, what have you learned after a year? And he goes, I can tell the difference between $7 worth of heroin and $10 worth of heroin just by looking at it. So anyway, that was my time in Baltimore, and I was very happy when I got a chance to go to Miami. I did 7 years up there. I'll tell you how much. Oh yeah, well, anyway, the movie, so I get back. The movie is being made while I'm up there. So I get down to Miami, and I get to Miami in September, and this movie comes out in April the next year. And immediately, one of the guys calls me from the office, says, you got to go watch The Wire. I'm like, why? He goes, it's us. He goes, it's like it's so clearly us. He goes, they've changed all the names. I go, well, which one am I? And he goes, oh, I don't know. He goes, it's all composite characters. But you could recognize some of them. Like there was a guy, Omar, on it. And it was like so obvious this was a guy named Crazy Eddie because he had been shot in the face. He was he worked for Tony Bay sometimes, but he worked for everybody because he would be an enforcer, but he also would go rob drug dealers all the time. And he'd been shot in the face with a pistol, and he survived. So his face was messed up, but people were also kind of scared of him. And he had 2 or 3 felony convictions, and we would jack him up every time we saw him looking for a gun. So he never carried a gun. And the famous story about him, which they used in The Wire, was he walks up to, cause in every one of these drug corner shops, they've always got one guy with a gun, and his job is to keep them from getting ripped off. And a lot of times we try to identify that guy and go snatch him up because they were easy to flip because once they had that gun on them, they were going to go do some time. So Crazy Eddie walks up to this drug shop and he goes, give me all your heroin and drugs. And they go, what? He goes, give him to me. They go, you don't even have a gun. He goes, do you want me to go get one? And they didn't. They gave it all to him. And he was famous for that. The other one we had, and I met him one day in our office. We had this, and he was in the wire too. His real name was Little Howard, and he was this contract assassin in Baltimore. I mean, and he killed, I don't know, they had him down for like dozen and a half murders. They weren't really sure. And his modus operandi was, just ring the glass when it's the point y'all want me to shut up. He was real small. He was like 5'2", 5'3", and kind of feminine looking. And he would, after he killed somebody, he had an assistant who later became an informant for me, who would help him dress like a girl. So when they come in looking, they would walk off like they're just two sisters, So he comes, what got him in trouble though was he killed a guy for Richie Rich, who was another one of the big dope dealers down there. And he was supposed to get paid $85,000, and Richie Rich stiffed him. He's like, I ain't gonna pay you, So he goes, and I never understood how this happened, but everybody swore it happened. Because Richie Rich was pretty normal sized, and pretty muscular looking. That Little Howard went up and just pistol whipped him in front of his whole crew. Took his gold Rolex off, climbed into his Escalade and drove off with it and said, I'll just take this instead. So Richie Rich immediately hires somebody to kill Little Howard. So one day I'm sitting in the office and they go, yeah, there's a Howard Baker here to see the duty agent. And I happened to be the duty agent that day. And I go, Howard Baker. And one of the Baltimore cop goes, that's Little Howard, man. I what? So if he's here, he might be here to kill us. So 4 of us went in there. We all had our vests on and everything. And we sat down, what do you want, Howard? He goes, I want to be an informant for y'all. I want to work for y'all. We're like, you can't be an informant. You kill like 1 million people. And he goes, yeah, but I could give y'all a lot of good information. I'm like, sorry. So he leaves, and they killed him 2 weeks after that. But then, like I said, later, I made an informant out of the girl who used to help him. So anyway, that's the Baltimore experience. That was 7 years, and it's funny. I thought I'd done 6 years. I've been telling everybody forever I did 6 years in Baltimore, and when I was going through that murder thing, I go, wait a minute, I did 7 years there. That's how much I hated it.
Well, when you're having a good time, it goes fast.
Oh, yes.
What has been the effect of these gangs like MS-13? Does that change things, or?
Yeah, they're going to be competing with them. There weren't really any Spanish gangs in Baltimore when I was there, but they're there now, and it's just a constant fight. They're going to be killing each other. They're going to be fighting.
Competition.
Yeah.
When you were working in the Baltimore airport, what percentage of people smuggling drugs in were U.S. citizens versus foreign nationals?
Oh, they were all U.S. citizens. They were almost all. Every once in a while you'd get, we got a guy with a diplomatic passport one day. We had to let him go, and we knew he was doing wrong, but we had to let him go. You'd get a few, but like I said, these were mostly people who worked for the local thugs. And they would find somebody that, they just knew, who was a heroin addict or, drug addict or something. Best line I ever got, when I told you could figure out who they were in the airport is, they were throwaway people. And they looked like throwaway people. They didn't look like normal people going through the airport. And I always say, people are like, oh, you stopped him because he's black. No. A third of the people going through that airport were black. It would have been, that wasn't what you were looking for. It was, you were looking for these people that looked like the people we saw standing in line for heroin, when we were working. Yeah.
Where were the drugs coming from?
The immediate source was back then was New York. Now, as far as what country they were coming from, back then most of your heroin was coming from Afghanistan. And there's a fun story about that one. I mean, anyway, Afghanistan is always a huge place for heroin because poppies grow so well there. One of the ways we got the Northern Alliance, who were the big poppy growers, when the Taliban came in, I mean, the Taliban hates everything. They hate Christians. They hate history. They hate women. but they also hate drugs. So they just completely wiped out the heroin traffic. Well, this is going to sound horrible, but the way the United States government brought the Northern Alliance in to help us fight the Taliban and Al-Qaeda was to tell them we'd let them start growing heroin again. And they do, and they did. And yeah.
In your opinion, do you think the drug problem we're facing in America could ever be solved or curtailed?
Yeah, I do. I do, but it's a lot of money. A lot of people think it used to be the drug sales were back when I retired. It was $65 billion a year. There was a lot of intel people that said if you pulled all that money out of the economy, you'd have a recession at the very least. Because a lot of the, you talk about what's John Maynard Keynes say, the conspicuous consumption. There is nobody that fits that description better than a drug dealer with hundreds of thousands of dollars and nothing else to do but go buy stuff. I mean, you would go in and you'd hit their houses and we'd be going through there. You'd see their CDs and you'd be going through them like every 50th or 20th CD, you'd see it, the same one again. It's like they ain't even watched it. They didn't even remember they bought it. You'd open it up, there'd be tennis shoes that just, 200 pairs of tennis shoes, none of them had ever been worn. Giant TVs. They always had two cars. That was the funny thing. They always had like a really tricked out Lexus or Mercedes or something. And they would never drive it into the hood. Every once in a while they would, but not usually because we'd grab it when they did. They drove these cars they call hoopties. And it would be like this 25-year-old Buick LeSabre or something. And they'd be driving that around. And it made it hard to spot because you're like, hey, is that Tony in that hoopty? And you go, yeah, it's Tony. Because I remember one time Richie Rich's partner had a Mercedes, nice Mercedes. And I had a seizure warrant out for it. I'd already gotten it, so I just filed a seizure warrant for it, but I didn't know where the car was. And one day I'm just riding around and I hear another agent run the tag. And I'm like, where are you? Where are you? And we rode over there and we made him get out of the car. We dumped all his stuff on the side of the road and took his Mercedes. But we didn't get to do that often. They were good at hiding that stuff. A lot of them none of them lived there in Baltimore. They all lived out in Baltimore County and stuff. They lived in fairly nice neighborhoods, as you were saying. But anyway, that's the Baltimore experience. So that's you can thank our police here that we don't have that here.
Always entertaining.
Oh, well, I hope so.
Delighted to have you. Thank you all for being